how quickly those are ripped away, it's right up there in one of the worst things to happen to a Boston player that I can remember in my history. So.
And Keith, very timely, you came out with the designated player exception story, which was well needed because it is really a big part of the aftermath and how this team's going to go forward. So I do have a few questions for you on that front. Great story, by the way. You got to go over there and check that out. Great information in there over on CelticsBlog. But I initially made the mistake thinking it was cap room, just straight up cap room that the team could use, $8 million. It's actually an exception, sort of like a trade exception now that since you've educated me. But what else do we have to know about this? I think my first big question is, if they use this, does that close the book on Hayward coming back this year? Because there are some people holding out hopes and like going off anecdotes players say that 5 months might bring him back by the end of the year.
Yeah, there is a few things like that are out there with the disabled player exception, and that's one of the questions that comes up most often that I've been asked is, does this mean he's out for the year if the Celtics use it? And the answer is no. If he proves to be a really quick healer and the team is in a position where they want to bring him back, they can. At that point, it's just considered to be, as much as him going down was an extreme stroke of bad luck, him returning before the end of this season would be an extreme stroke of good luck. So if they were to use it to bring in a player, Hayward can come back. They're not impacted at all as far as his return or with the player that they bring in with it, because that tends to be the follow-up question is, do they then have to waive the guy that they signed with it? No, it just happens that way. Now, that's extremely unlikely because if there's this is why the team's being very cautious in the way they're phrasing things. Yeah. And they're the ones who are avoiding putting true timelines on this and that. Because if they leave the door open at all, the NBA is just going to flat deny this.
There's an application process, isn't there?
Exactly. Yeah, there is. So what has to happen is the Celtics have to apply for it. Now, unless they've done it without it being reported, the Celtics are very unlikely to make an announcement in a press release that they've applied for it. It's not the kind of thing you do, but it'll eventually come out. So unless they've done it without it coming out, they have not done this as of yet. And that's likely because they're still sorting through Hayward's rehab and recovery process to understand it. But the process is they apply to the NBA, then the NBA's fitness to play panel, which is the panel that basically it's an independent panel that determines if guys are fit to play or not. It's the panel that ultimately decided if Chris Bosh should return or not. They decide, and or an NBA approved physician looks at it and says, yeah, this guy's not likely to. It is more. The phrasing is a little difficult because the CBA always has to make things legalese. But what it says is the player is more unlikely than not to return before June 15th.
Is there any doubt in this case, you think?
That he could return?
That they'd look at that injury and say, no. Like, it just seems like such a gruesome injury, such a, just the way everyone reacted to it, the nature of it. I don't think they'd get denied. I don't know.
Well, you want to say you want to say no, right? You want to say no, there's no way he's coming back. But if the team's leaving the door open, which they're leaving it a little bit, without concretely, committing to a timeline, there is the potential that he could come back. We've seen reports of people saying guys have returned back from things like this in 3 or 4 months if they're quick healers. Other people saying 5. Yeah, either one of those timelines brings them back before the end of this season. So, it's going to be tricky. I would say more likely than not, what the Celtics are going to go into with is we're not going to bring him back, even if he's ready.
Yeah.
There's probably no reason to rush him back. So I think they're probably gonna try to beat those timelines down. And then if he does come back, then it's just wow, look at that. What great fortune we had.
I hope y'all are taking notes. This is just the CBA makes your head spin. Jeff, I'm gonna bring it back to Keith real quick after this, but I'm a big no. Like, I don't think there's any way you should bring him back this season. I know everyone's just so hyper emotional right now, but just get healthy. I mean, there's 4 years ahead on that. I think it was a 4-year deal or a 5-year deal, Keith.
3 + 1.
3 + 1. So yeah. So
player option on the 4th year.
You got 2 years guaranteed beyond this. Get him right for those 2 years. Next year becomes that big year. Your agreement that shut him down for the year.
It depends, and it depends on his rehab schedule and stuff like that. As Keith said, but at the same time, if they're being cautious and they have 100% reason to do so, I would almost feel nervous bringing him back early unless it's like, oh my goodness, he's 100%, 3 months early, and he's already gotten a week, or I'm sorry, another month of getting up into game speed and game shape. I mean, I would really want to it would have to be a miraculous recovery for him to come back this year. And like he said, you leave that door open if you can, but at the same time, there's zero reason to push it, and honestly, personally, I would be really nervous that he would re-injure it based on the quick return.
That would be 10 times worse than we're already feeling right now. But Keith, it's $8.5 million or so, give or take, with a couple things there factoring into that. So say they make a trade for that player, it needs to be an expiring contract that's coming back to the Celtics. How does salary matching work in that case, and can they get bird rights on a guy? I know the name's floating around is Nerlens Noel. I don't think Dallas is in a position to trade him yet, but say that comes up. Would they have the right to sign Noel back and go over the cap doing so if they got Noel?
Yeah, so you're exactly right on. It needs to be an expiring contract. So that rules out anybody with an option unless it is a team option that's declined prior to acquisition, or a player option that the player declines prior to acquisition. So that's, that already, now you're limited in your market that you can go for. As to your question about bird rights, this isn't anything to do with the Celtics portion of making a trade. This is fully to do with whether or not that player's bird rights transfer. Yeah. And any player who's playing on a 1-year deal who has bird rights are voided if they're traded. So in Nerlens Noel's case, if he was traded to the Celtics, he loses his bird rights. If he's traded anywhere, he loses his bird rights. And there's no way to gain those back. There's nothing that happens with that. The only team that's going to have his bird rights is the Dallas Mavericks. If he goes anywhere else this season via trade, that team loses it. So the Celtics would lose out. So you're looking at a guy who's probably in the last year of a multi-year contract or something like that. If you're really looking for this to be a long-term piece that you're looking to re-sign, or you're looking at more of we can plug this guy in for 1 year, do the best we can, and move forward.
What are some other names you've heard, Keith?
Hold on, I actually had a follow-up question on that. Like, so Nerlens, say theoretically he will only accept a max contract at the end of this year, and we trade for him. Do we not have the cap space to sign him? That's what I'm assuming is the case.
Yeah, no, not with Hayward, Horford, and Kyrie together. They combined for a little over $80 million by themselves of what's projected to be $101 million cap. And then you've got guys like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Morris. Pretty soon we're completely out of cap space before we even hit the summer. So at that point, the best they could do is 20% of the previous year's salary for Noel, which is a very minor raise.
Yeah, so that's not happening.
You're talking about bumping him up to
that's why I was going to move on. What are some other names out there that you've heard that probably have a better chance ending up here than Noel?
Yeah, so one thing I would watch for right now is we're coming up on a deadline in a little over a week of rookie scale options needing to be picked up, which, by the way, the Celtics have not yet done for Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier. I got this question a couple times. Don't read anything into that. Celtics always wait on these things, and then they do them.
We know that well from Smart.
Yeah, you just want to be careful. If one of them steps in front of a bus tomorrow, you want to be able to, we're going to decline his option. So it's
wow, this got really dark, really fast.
This is a bad episode.
You take it to the worst possible place, knowing it won't possibly get there, right? So it's so with a guy whose name has been coming up more and more recently is Bobby Portis of the Chicago Bulls. There's increasing speculation that the Bulls are going to decline his rookie scale option. for next year, which then would make him eligible to be acquired by the designated player exception, or disabled player exception, excuse me. And then the Celtics could go get him. Now, the challenge with a guy like that is then they're limited to paying him a max of whatever his contract would have been in the 2018-19 season, which in the case of Portis is $2.5 million or so. And that's what happened with James Young this past year when they declined his option. It's so you can't circumvent the cap and, you know, decline an option and then pay these guys $40 million. That's why they put that safeguard in there, so you can't do that and work around it that way. So it's going to be tricky.
And there's the fact that he punched the guy in the face. Not too.
Well, yeah, that if you want to take it on.
Yeah,
well, I don't know. The past couple of years, I think some of our fans out there would have suggested the Celtics needed a guy who would punch somebody in the face.
We've actually got a couple of Marcuses that I'm sure will be up for the task if that ever came up. So, like, it sounds like in that situation he would be a rental, because I can't see Bobby Portis signing for $2 million or whatever it is that he's making this year. So it's beginning to sound to me like any guy that we trade using the disabled player exception is going to be a rental for this year, not necessarily a long-term piece. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. This exception is not designed around a team getting a long-term piece. That's why it has to be an expiring contract. That's why there's all those limitations to how much you can pay them, which is, it's either half of the player's salary or the amount equivalent to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which in this case, half of Hayward's salary would be nearly $15 million. So that's why it's only $8.4 million. In trade, you get the bump of an extra $100,000 because of the way the trade rules work. So that's where you're at. It's not designed around you going out and, otherwise Danny Ainge would find a way to, knock somebody out every year and, use this one.
Well, I was going to say, Keith, I think you've got your facts wrong, because obviously everything is built around making the Celtics better. I mean, all the rules should be designed around that.
Well, and it's funny, and I've heard some people suggest it's just another way for the Celtics to get these great players. And it's like, all right, come on. I mean, there's no one they can get that can replace Hayward.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea around this exception is you have lost a really good player, and we're going to give you the ability to bring someone in, but it's not going to be someone who's nearly as good. And the other big thing is, because this question comes up a lot, and it generally goes to, like, could they combine it with Marcus Morris's salary or Yabusele's salary or somebody like that and go get a guy who makes 10, 12, 13 million? No, it has to be used by itself, and it can only be used on one player. That's the other question that keeps coming up too is, well, can they split it and go get two guys who make 4 million? No, can't be done. Got to be used on one player. So it's really one of those things where it's a tool that even when teams are granted it, the Lakers got one a couple of years ago, and the Lakers didn't even use it.
Yeah. Or
they only used a portion of it very late in the year. I can't remember which it was. But it's because you're not going to just add $8 million to add $8 million. So you have to be a good team. And generally teams who lose a player that good to qualify for this big of an exception they're not very good after losing that player. So the Celtics are in this kind of world of they could still be pretty good, so it's worth exploring and using. The one thing I expect, because I've had, again, a lot of questions of, well, why haven't they done it yet? Well, there's the deadline is January 10th, so there's no reason to rush into this. Yeah, they could do it tomorrow. Generally takes a few days to a week to play out, and then make whatever move they want to make. In addition, any guys who signed one-year deals this summer, they're not eligible to be traded until January. Or, excuse me, mid-December, rather.
I think Bobby Marks said today 30% of the league's ineligible to be traded right now. So
yeah, and that's the other thing. So the Celtics don't need to rush into anything right now. People have been like, well, they could go sign Gerald Green with it. Well, they could go sign Gerald Green using the minimum exception, not have to dip into this at all if they wanted to do that. That's just we all love Gerald, right? But that's the reality of what kind of player he is at this point. So it just becomes a situation of they will do it because Danny Ainge is never going to let an opportunity of flexibility come in, but there's no rush to do it today. They'll do it when they're probably closer to ready to actually use the disabled player exception.
And I hope you guys all took notes, because we just finished the big math equation we need to build to get Gordon Hayward in here, and now we're already on to the next one with him down and out this season.